So 200,000 children were taken from families, and they were not orphans at all. They were distributed like property. And the mindset that poor, disabled, or marginalized families could have their children taken was institutionalized in 1962. Now hold on to your seats, because this occurred in New York State. In 1962, with what was called the Family Court Act, and it was financially incentivized with the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997. So it was, just so you know, the 1962 Family Court Act that was put into place in New York, started in New York and then went across the whole country, leave to New York. Basically, what they did was they put this in without the vote of you and I. So without the vote of the people, not state or congressionally. And you wonder why it's on sinking sand. We didn't vote it in. So what does that mean, everybody? That means that they usurped our authority. Okay? And then when they did that, they held everybody down and said, you're down here, we're here. Okay? But we're now here showing them where we are and who we are, because the authority belongs to us. We're actually their boss. Okay? They are our employees, not the other way around, to walk all over us the way they've been doing and destroying children and families for decades. So then it was, again, ASFA, which is also in the bill, which I want it completely abolished. Yeah. So every child removed became a source of revenue. So it's not just about money, though. It's child trafficking, period. That's what it is. This is slavery right here you're looking at. This is slavery of children. And it's continuing. It's in modern day society, continuing under the guise of, this is a court. It looks like a court. It's got, it's got the judge in the front, and it's got the seats, and it's got what looks like a court, but it's not a court at all, because it wasn't voted in by the people. And then they incorporated judicial immunity to that. They added that in. They threw that in for, a bonus, so they can do whatever they want to you. And then, of course, the police support that, and everybody supports that when that's all illegal. Okay, so it says, today we have, hold on to your seat, a multi-trillion-dollar system that profits from family separation. Think of what things cost today. You know what things cost today. You can't even buy a loaf of bread. Think of what things cost. Now think about what this business has brought in financially. People go, it's a multi-million-dollar, it's a multi-million. Honey, it's a multi-trillion-dollar child trafficking industry. That's what it is. Okay. Section 3, human rights and ADA violations. That's where I'm a forensic expert. And that's where, and actually we have Victoria Griffin here, she's my mentor, and she is exceptional when it comes to the ADA. Contacted courts and then changed the Unified Court System website to actually say what the ADA actually says and not what they say it says. So she's actually put those words in. It's disgusting. So our nation has no uniform judicial training on human rights. Judges receive little to no meaningful training on the Americans with Disability Act, despite being legally bound to comply with it. Families with disabilities are routinely denied accommodations that are guaranteed under federal law. ADA rights are treated as discretionary when they are, in fact, mandatory civil rights protections. It's not a, I'll grant you this, I'm not going to grant you that. How dare they? If a man rolled into the courtroom in a wheelchair, the judge isn't going to say, we're going to hold a hearing and grant his wheels, but we're going to take away his seat, right? It's the same thing with what I call invisible injury. Okay, they call it mental illness. I don't like using that connotation because it sounds something is radically wrong with someone, and in some cases we are trolls, so there is something wrong with some people. But with the majority of people, we have people that have what's called invisible injury. It could be PTSD, depression, whatever the court caused you to have, because the court is causing it. Maybe you're in a domestic violence situation, you go for help, and then they make it even worse, right? They re-victimize you and they cause further damage to you. Well, that's a psychological injury. There's nothing wrong with you personally as a human being, right? It's just that they've done this to you. And so that's why there's something awesome called legal abuse syndrome on the DSM-5 now, when it defines Z. And that is there so we can sue them, but they're not allowing it because the court system goes all the way up the food chain where they're in full control. But not anymore. That day ended today. So, families with disabilities are routinely denied these accommodations under federal law. These are federal codifications, and they are such amazing fortified protections, and that's why they don't want you to know about it. That's why they keep the Constitution out, and that's why they keep the Articles of Human Rights out of the court. So just think, those are all three where you can sue, but you can also go after them for criminal charges because they're causing massive damages, right? This bill mandates judicial training on the Constitution, human rights, and the ADA, ensuring that no judge can claim ignorance when violating a family's civil rights. Section 4, the human cost. This is not an abstract policy. These are lives. According to the Center for Judicial Excellence, at least 64 children were killed in custody and visitation-related cases in 2022 alone. I'm sure there's more than that. I don't think they even are saying that, because you have to understand that these are coming through custody orders, and what I see, what I've witnessed over the years is a whole heck of a lot more than that. But they're not marking that. They're not telling you that a judge made that order, okay? 30 more deaths were already reported halfway through this year alone, 2025. These numbers are not just statistics, they are sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, and many of them were placed in danger by the very system claiming to act in their best interest. Section 5, the solutions in this act. The Family Justice and Accountability Act is bold because incremental change is no longer enough. It ends immunity for judges. So, remember I told you that we never voted it in? Even President Trump's lawyers didn't know what I know. Isn't that funny? So when he went through what he went through with the, 34 felony charge nonsense, which we all know was nonsense, leave it to New York again, right? They said that they couldn't wipe out the immunity part because they're saying that it was constitutional. It's not constitutional. Family court is, again, we didn't vote it in. Did you guys vote it in? Did your ancestors vote it in? Did your grandparents vote it in?
No.
Would anybody with a brain vote this in? No. So that makes the qualified immunity completely illegal. It's actually treason on American soil. These courts are operating in treason on American soil. So that's how we get them, and we end it. We end all this immunity. And again, bottom line, when they built this mess, when they built it, okay, they did not incorporate the Constitution. How many of you here, by a show of hands, had attorneys tell you, don't mention the Constitution? Anybody here? Look at this. How many of you in here tried to assert your ADA rights and were denied? Completely against the law, right? Completely. It's federal protection. Okay? It's sick. Okay? Qualified federally protected rights. Okay? And how many here, what about your Articles of Human Rights? You know that, I believe it's in the womb, but you know that the second a baby is born, they have the same exact human rights that all of us have here. Okay? Are they getting that in family court? No. So those are, even with their immunity, their pretend immunity, even with that, okay, that automatically disqualifies them from having qualified immunity. And so every lawsuit that goes out that shows this pattern of abuse against these three huge prongs that are on federal protections, every single one of them should win. Every single one of them should win. And I'm talking millions of dollars. Especially since the damages are repeated molestations, repeated physical abuse, separation from biological family. There's nothing worse than that. There's nothing worse than that. The psychological damage alone, okay? And which the video that is going on for 4 hours straight, we could have taken in hundreds of thousands of more videos. We couldn't fit them all. They would just keep coming. I would keep having to do this. Susan would have to produce this for God knows how long. We're talking decades of family court, right? So the damages alone. And what about the deaths of children because of family court? And the deaths of women and the deaths of fathers committing suicide and so on and so forth. And the fact that they're empowering abusers to have power over their victims. So judicial immunity would be completely wrong. Okay. Also, it would strip the CPS workers, child predator services, or child pedophilia services. You can pick one. The gals, guardian ad litems, that are trained to literally place children with abusers. That's what they're trained to do. And that's what they find out in case. They stay with the abuser, and the abuser gets custody every time. But that's why all these organizations out there that want 50-50. I'm sorry. First of all, a child is 100% a whole being. This is the 21st century. You're going to tell me that we're that ignorant, that we're going to put our teeth in the ground, and we're going to insist on 50-50 custody, splitting a child in half, even if you've got two good parents, and I work with good parents all the time, mothers and fathers, that are just normal, decent people. What I've experienced in 18 years of court watching judges all over the entire country, what I've experienced, literally seeing these judges, literally seeing these cases, I've seen that there's always one abuser in every family case. Very rarely is it two decent people that got stuck in the vortex of family court, and then they do a number on those families. They'll rip them apart. But most of these family court, I'm not talking about relative to CPS. I'm talking about strictly family court. There's always one abuser. Can anybody here attest to that? So why do even the father's rights movement that insists on 50-50 custody? You know they want 100% custody because that's what they end up with. They don't get 50%. And if they call the women the horrible names that they call them, what happens? Why, I say to them, why would you want 50-50 if she's that horrible? You mean you want your child with a horrible woman? Why would you? Why should a child go to an abuser and back to a normal home, and an abuser and back to a normal home? There are so many more holistic and wonderful ways that if you break up your relationship when you're two decent people, you know, that this can be done. I see it every single day. We have something called Alternative to Family Court, where we take them through sessions and we teach them how to protect their assets, how to protect their homes, how to protect their livelihood, and above all, how to protect their children from a broken home. You don't want a broken system doing that for you. You want to be able to do this the most holistic and healthy way possible so that children don't have to, on Monday I'm here, on Tuesday I'm here, on Wednesday I'm here. That's ridiculous. Nobody wants to live like that. That is so unstable. So what you want to do is when you work together as a normal dad and a normal mom, then you say, listen, I have to go to Wyoming next week. Can you take little Johnny? Absolutely, that's wonderful. And vice versa. Or I work full time. You're not getting that child 50% of the time if you're not there 40, 50, 60 hours a day, right? Then you're not. There's a stranger now taking care of your kid. So that doesn't work. 50-50 does not work. It's archaic and it's dangerous, and you're going to learn that today by this panel of experts. Okay, where was I? Okay, section 4, again, is the human cost. Again, I was saying this is not an abstract policy. These are lives. And again, according to the Center for Judicial Excellence, at least 64 children were killed, they said, in 2022, and then 30 more deaths in 2025. Again, I do believe it's more than that. So section 5 is the solutions in this act, ending judicial immunity and for not just CPS workers, gals, but law enforcement. Okay, so we have a whole section on law enforcement, and of course we respect our police officers. We're law-abiding citizens, aren't we? Enough of that. Okay. Alright. Let's stop playing. The deal is that these law enforcement agents take an oath. They take an oath. They've lied to the public for many years saying that they don't do the oath anymore. That is a lie. Don't believe social media and these people. Okay? What we will be doing with this act is that if a law enforcement agent abides by a custody order from one of these drug-addicted, mentally ill judges that makes custody orders for abusers, because that's what they are. That's what they are. I can prove that, because I've seen it. They have committees all through the country. I've seen it. I know about them. I've written them, and I've talked to them. There are mental health committees for judges. So because there's so many judges that are depressed, gee, I wonder why. You're destroying children. You should be, okay? That are on all kinds of drugs, cocaine and you name it, drunk on the bench. Has anybody dealt with a case where a judge was drunk on the bench? I can tell you multiple judges that have been drunk on the bench while they're performing their duties, making a decision. So if you have an abusive person that's abusing substances, how is that judge going to be able to judge you properly when they've got problems themselves? So these committees are for their mental health. And so my argument with them is, if they've got these severe mental health issues, why are they judging other people's lives that come in that don't drink and don't do drugs and don't have these issues themselves? Why are they making the determinations for these families? So with that, we're talking about law enforcement. Law enforcement, if law enforcement comes to somebody's house without a warrant, first of all, or if law enforcement sees that the custody order to take somebody's children away, This violates the Constitution because they desperately need training, okay? They need this de-escalation training when it comes to ADA traumas, but they need training when it comes to the Constitution. If they follow that court order and they take someone's children, they will be held personally liable, both civilly and criminally, because they took an oath. And you know what we have to do in this country? We have to take our oath seriously. I am so sick and tired of it. Why are people taking an oath to the Constitution? Why are they taking an oath to their job to do something and they're not doing it? Why are they doing that? It's not a joke. Okay, our founding fathers put these things in place because it's very, very serious. Human life is very, very serious. To me, nothing is more important than the biological family. Nothing is more important in our entire country. I don't care what's happening politically in this entire world. If we don't have families that are stable and held together, what do we have here? What do we have? So it goes after them as well. Some other issues regarding wrongful removals. It enforces transparency through mandatory recordings. Just like I just got done saying, we don't know that that's an accurate number. I don't believe it. There's a lot of statistics that are out there, and I rewrote the proper statistics in my second book, I Survived a Narcissist, You Can Too. You definitely want to get a copy. I'll give free ones out electronically if you can't afford one. That has genuine statistics. I'm going to give you an example. Have you seen where they say that the single-parent home, and usually moms, their children can't read, they're in jail, they're foaming from the mouth because they're being raised by mother only, the fatherless home? I'm all for marriage. I'm all for husbands and wives. But see, I come from a family where there's normal, decent husbands, normal, decent cousins, normal, decent men, good men that would never hit a woman. They wouldn't attack her like, Michael Volpe's been doing for 2 days for no reason, just constantly attacking. They wouldn't talk to a woman that way. They respect women, okay? And in turn, they're respected, correct? So I'm saying that because basically what they're saying, these have been lies that have been sent out by these movements of attacking women, all right? And in reality, and it's such an insult that you have a broken relationship that you probably didn't want. You didn't want to get married to somebody who beat you up in the corner. No, I don't know any woman that wants that, okay? I know that less than 6% of women that report abuse are lying, but yet 94% get treated like crazy liars. Why is that? So, with saying that, I want to tell you that the statistics that they say, they're actually talking about foster care statistics. That's what's happening to children in foster care, not in a one-parent household. So if dad is the parent that's raising the household, and raising the children, for whatever reason, maybe she's off on heroin somewhere or whatever, why should he be insulted that the child's going to be in jail, the child can't read? It's just not even close to the truth. Not even close. But in foster care, it is 100% true. And so when you see these Netflix specials where children ended up really bad, and they ended up in prison and blah, 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 and doing crazy things, every single one of them came from foster care. I did the research myself. Not a one-parent household. Okay? That's nonsense. Complete nonsense. Okay. They're very dangerous. So now we have the solutions in this act, guaranteeing open records so that everybody can see what's really going on, not all this hidden stuff. Guaranteeing ADA protections and requires virtual access for disabled parents. It shifts funding to family preservation and not child removal. It protects protected parents from losing custody for reporting abuse. It recognizes children as independent right holders, not commodities. There are custody numbers on children, you guys. Each of them they're worth a lot of money to the court system. Okay, very sick. And above all, it declares that wrongful removal is state violence, and it can be criminalized. So you can criminalize the judges and put them in jail. Has anybody seen the judge was arrested? Did you all get to see that and enjoy that? It's something you might want to watch during dinner over and over. It's very enjoyable. Very enjoyable. It was for me, that was like anti. I don't know where the necklace. Okay, so Section 6 is legislative intent and accountability. The intent of this act is simple and powerful: to restore the U.S. Constitution to family courts, to end the perverse financial incentives that have driven child removal, to hold every office official accountable, and no matter their title, and to ensure family separation is truly a last resort. And of course, it wouldn't just go mom and dad. We're talking grandparents, aunts, uncles, biological family. Keep the children in biological families. Keep them in biological families, okay? To me, that's mad science. When strangers are taking in children, horrible things happen. Horrible things. It is much more, child trafficking against these little children is far more dark and far more serious than you can imagine. And to me, the gateway door is family court. I've said it for years. The gateway door to child trafficking is indeed 100% through the doors of family court. Stealing a child from Walmart is about less than 2%. It's family court that's destroying our families, period. Of course, to end the perverse financial incentives and to have that have driven child removal, and to hold every official, that includes judges, number one, my top priority, accountable. No matter their title, and to ensure family separation is always, 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 always going to be the very extreme last resort, that no official should ever again be allowed to harm a family and hide behind immunity. And closing, the moral imperative. We often say family is the foundation of our nation. If that's true, then protecting families must be a national priority, period. This bill is not just a piece of legislation, it is a moral declaration that America will no longer, and this is all of you, allow its own courts to violate its own constitution. I urge you as leaders, as parents, as human beings, to stand with the families of this nation. Let this Congress be remembered not for watching injustice, but for ending it once and for all. Because when we protect families, we protect the very soul of this nation. Amen. Amen. Okay, I have a panel here of expert witnesses and core team leaders, and we're going to get to all your testimonies today. Again, this is going to go to all 525 House representatives and state U.S. senators, okay? So it will be heard. Today, I'm going to start, right in order. And everybody else is going to have, they're going to have longer time, guys, but as you know, every person that gets to come up to the podium, I'll call you by name. It's 3 minutes at the podium. So I have Dr. Michael Hollick. He's a PhD, MD, Professor of Medicine, Pharmacology, Physiology, and Biophysics Director, Vitamin D, Skin and Bone Research, Laboratory Director, Biologic Effects of Light Research, Program Director of the EDS Clinical Research Program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be able to do this. Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be able to do this. And all congressmen, I hope that you will really get this message clear. So I am Professor of Medicine, Pharmacology, Physiology, Biophysics, and Molecular Medicine. I'm Director of the Andrew Stanley's Clinical Research Program at Boston University School of Medicine.
All right!
I am a licensed physician in the state of Massachusetts, and I am a mandated reporter for child abuse. I do not promote child abuse. So how did this all begin? 1969 at the University of Wisconsin, I was given the responsibility to identify the major circulating form of vitamin D, which I did in 3 months. So if you go to the doctor to get a vitamin D test, I'm the guy that discovered it.
Wow.
A year later, I got my PhD degree. Why? Because I identified the active form of vitamin D that's made by your kidneys. We began to realize that kidney failure patients, the reason they had such severe bone disease, they couldn't activate vitamin D. I'm an organic chemist. My roommate and I, as a graduate student, we were the first chemistry to make it. And the material that we made, we gave to pediatricians and adult doctors of children that not only had kidney disease, wheelchair bound, and began to walk again, but also a rare disease of rickets. where these children couldn't activate vitamin D. And what I provided to these children cured them. So by 1972, I was recognized as one of the world leading experts in the field of pediatric and adult metabolic illnesses. 1987, I was recruited by Boston City Hospital, and it became Boston Medical Center, to be chief of endocrinology, nutrition, and diabetes. I was director of the General Clinical Research Center, responsible for all clinical research in the EU. And they asked me to set up a pediatric and adult metabolic clinic, which I did. And I was director until 2021. How did I get involved in this? In 2010, I received a phone call from a mom, desperate for help. And she said, I need your help. And I said, how can I help? And she said, I've been and my husband accused of child abuse. And I said, I don't know anything about child abuse. I don't know how I can help you. And she said, my son had bone fractures. You're one of the world's leading experts. Please see us. And I did. And I wound up seeing this family and realized that the mom and the child had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I have been writing about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome since 1980. We know that this genetic disorder increases risk of fractures more than twofold in children and adults. And so I got to see the family. I went to family court, and actually the family court listened to me. And I gave the child back to the family. I followed that family for 8 years. Now here's the problem. I received a phone call from a woman in Minnesota, and she was distraught. And I have a Ehlers-Danlos clinical research program. And I don't just willy-nilly take phone calls and Zoom calls and just assume that, there's no issue here. I carefully vet them. I ask them questions and have them fill out a questionnaire. And so I talked to this mom and I said, I need to talk to you and your husband. And she said, I can't talk to my husband. And I said, why? So then she told me her story. So she has 2 children at home and a 6-month-old that had a bruise. Her and her husband, who is a fireman locally and captain of the Navy originally, they went to the hospital thinking that the pediatrician would come out and explain what was going on. Instead, two detectives showed up, put them in handcuffs, took them to the police station, and interrogated them for the next 8 hours. And so finally the detective convinced the husband, look, maybe you squeezed the intern a little bit too tightly, you were tired one day, you take some parenting classes and everything will be fine. And so he signed on the dotted line. And sure enough, he was instantly accused of felony child abuse, wife permitting it, 2 children at home gone, and 6-month-old taken away for put in the grandparents, the term grandparents care. The father was so distraught, he didn't know how he was going to get his children back. So he decided there's only one way. So he wrote a note saying, I did this, I apologize, all right, give the children back to my wife, and commit suicide. Oh, that's not the story. Oh, no. She is 12 weeks pregnant. She gives birth, breastfeeding her infant, her daughter. 5 days later, ECS shows up and takes her infant away and puts her in foster care. Also, during the time that they were in parental grandparents' care, they developed some bruise in the child. So now, not only the parents child abusers, but even the grandparents were child abusers. And they were taken away and put into a group foster care home. She went to court and lost twice. And then ultimately, she went to the Supreme Court, appealed, and finally got a kid back. She no longer has a husband. I received over 400 emails requesting my help. I sent off this questionnaire to all, and I helped well over 100 families be reunited. In 2015, I kept my hospital fully employed, and they were congratulating me for my help. And then all of a sudden, I got two families in Massachusetts that asked me for their help. And I testified opposite the pediatricians at my hospital. So whereas my hospital was fully in favor of my activity, it turned 180 degrees. And I was told that the board of trustees of the hospital and the CEO of the hospital, they said, we've got to get rid of this guy. And so then, even though I'm the world's leading expert in this area, and Google Scholar, I published over 900 publications. I have over 100,000 citations. Meta GPS Scholar reviewed 20 million scholars, 300 million publications, and they recognized me as number one in endocrinology, number one in vitamin D, and number two in the world for bone. I'm told by my hospital I can no longer see pediatric patients. And so I gave a Daubert hearing, right, a pre-trial hearing. My expert report was taken by the child abuse expert and sent to a child abuse expert in Yale, who then sent it to my chief. And since they said I couldn't make a diagnosis in the interim, I got the phone call that I'm going to be fired. I went in front of the medical advisory committee, ad hoc committee. They said they were going to terminate me, but then they said, well, they're going to actually put me on leave for 9 months. But they said, wait, because you can go in front of the ad hoc committee for the board of trustees. They didn't introduce themselves. They gave me 15 minutes. And a couple of hours later, I received a letter saying I'd been terminated from Boston Medical School. Right? I remain as professor of medicine at Boston University School of Medicine. I still have my clinical research program, and I have now over 600 DNA samples trying to raise money. We've published 3 published papers now on the genetics of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and mast cell hypersensitivity. Finally, why am I doing this? I'm 79 years old. I had stage 3 prostate cancer, the most severe form. Right? I went to the courts, right? Lost all of my financial welfare, basically. Also, the bank that owns my home. And so, my wife, being quite distraught about this, almost lost my marriage for 53 years. And it was actually a Christmas miracle that saved it, and it was stronger than ever. Men and women listening to this, right? Why am I doing this? Right? My family asked me the same question, and the answer is simple. And I think Senator John Lewis made it very clear. He said, when you know something is wrong, you are obligated to help make it right. And I'm a physician, do no harm, and as a result, even over the weekend, I got 2 more cases. I get a case or 2 every week. The family is still trying to contact me. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I have a good day.
Our next expert is Veronica York. Veronica is nationally recognized domestic violence, DV and child abuse custody expert. Her partner is Goldstein and York, which is Barry Goldstein. DV Experts, LLC, qualified in 10 states to provide expert testimony in domestic violence custody cases. Trained family law mediator, certified high conflict divorce coach, extensive experience educating courts, professionals, and communities on evidence-based research to protect children in high-risk custody situations. Expertise in impact of DV on children, adverse childhood experiences, which is ACE, research, U.S. Department of Justice Saunders study, primary attachment research, shared parenting, child sexual abuse, and gender bias in family court proceedings, misuse of parental alienation, my favorite annoying subject. Let me add the word syndrome. Let's say it together.
Syndrome.
And then coercive control and Darrow tactics. Everybody welcome Veronica York.
It's so nice to be here, and just having everyone together is wonderful. And thank you so much, Doctor, for the work you've done. And I know firsthand the retaliation that you get when you are an advocate and when you stand up for what's right. But we still do it because that's what we have to do for the children. So thank you for the introduction. Thank you everyone for being here. The first thing I want to do is just provide a little bit of context for the situation I think that we're all in. We're going to hear a lot of your stories, and I think this context helps people understand who are outside of our bubble who don't get it. Because even when I was outside of the bubble, I didn't get it. It wasn't until I became a victim of the family court system that I understood what was really going on. So there's two contexts. The first one is that most contested custody cases are handled amicably, settled out of courts. You have two good safe parents. There's a very small percentage, less than 4%, that require trial and all the other things that go along with that. And 75 to 90% of those cases are domestic violence and child abuse cases. So when courts are looking at all of the docket, they're seeing mostly cases where they can use standard court practices. These small percentage of domestic violence cases are different and have to be handled differently. And they don't understand that because they're not using evidence-based research when they're doing their cases. They're using the same old standard court practices that have been developed back in the 1970s when there was no research about domestic violence and child abuse. So with that context, we are looking at a very specific paradigm shift that needs to happen in family court, because I believe that judges don't want to hurt children, ultimately. Obviously, there are those that do. But for the most part, judges are trying to do what's best for children, but they do not have the tools, nor the knowledge, nor the expertise to do it. So as an expert witness coming in, I'm trying to provide them with the evidence-based research to help them do their jobs more efficiently, more effectively, and these cases can be settled or ruled on very quickly with this information. They don't have to drag on for decades and decades. But the problem is when we're appointing guardian ad litems, when we're appointing custody evaluators, parenting facilitators, all therapists, all the stuff, it's a money train, and they don't want that money train to stop. So we're dealing with that too. The other context I wanted to quickly provide is that 99% of these cases is that during the relationship, the father wanted or demanded the mother provide the majority of the child care. When the mother decides she's had enough of the abuse, she wants to report as abuse, she wants to leave, and she leaves the relationship, the father then says, she's crazy or she's alienating my children. And to the court system, that sounds like she's an unfit parent. But the reality is that the abuser is the unfit parent. And so that context is extremely important in family court because abusers are able to manipulate the court system because of that specific context. And so with research like ACE, she mentioned adverse childhood experiences, we can show courts that the well-being of the child should be the first priority is the health and safety. And you can't do that without the ACE research because the ACE research fundamentally says that children who are exposed to domestic violence and other trauma, like child abuse, will live shorter lives and face a lifetime of health and social problems. So your children are experiencing anxiety, depression, low self-esteem, suicide, all of these things because they've been exposed to domestic violence. And we are not talking about physical violence. Courts state domestic violence is physical violence, and on the criminal side, it can be. But in family court, it's the stress and fear that abusers cause. So that stress and fear is what we have to look at in family court and how that impacts the child. Because that stress and fear is what's going to ruin their lives. And courts don't get that. And so they're looking at all these best interest factors, and they are looking at, because they don't understand domestic violence, they're minimizing that impact, and they're looking at other factors that are just not as important as the child's health and safety. So we need to get that as the first priority. The Saunders study out of the U.S. Justice Department was a study that assessed the domestic violence knowledge of judges, lawyers, and evaluators. Because custody evaluators are the mental health professionals that courts rely on, depend on for information. And the problem is that custody evaluators do not have the specific knowledge and expertise needed to recognize and respond correctly to domestic violence and child abuse. So they're not screening for domestic violence. What they're doing is they're using psychological tests that are not telling us anything about domestic violence, and they're pretty much making abuse victims out to be the perpetrators, because again, abuse victims are going to have PTSD, they're going to have anxiety, they're going to have a lot of issues caused by the abuse. And so we need to understand that. And what Saunders is saying is that we need to have specific knowledge in 4 areas in these cases. So that does include screening for domestic violence. It includes risk assessments. It includes post-separation abuse, because abuse does not end when the relationship ends. They use the court system to continue that abuse. And you need the impact of domestic violence on children, which is ACE. So without that knowledge, the courts are using the wrong professionals and the wrong experts. So how can we protect children when we're not using the right experts? So as an expert in domestic violence, we want to create this multidisciplinary approach in family court. Honestly, you don't even need a custody evaluator. Custody evaluators are making things worse because a lot of them are proponents of the false and pseudoscience parental alienation syndrome. And what is really good parenting by a mother is looked at as parental alienation, because they're trying to protect their children from further abuse. And that parental alienation syndrome is being touted by fathers' rights groups, who are usually the abusers, who are trying to get across the 50-50. And as Francesca said earlier, shared parenting, the Saunders study specifically found that shared parenting is not appropriate in domestic violence cases for very obvious reasons. And when we impose things like shared parenting, what we're doing is we're giving the abuser all of the power. Because there is an unequal balance of power, obviously, between the abuser and the victim. So shared parenting can never work in those cases. I'll briefly talk about gender bias, because in family court, I think the perception is that family court is biased against fathers, but the truth is, it's very biased against mothers. And the reason for that is that they're giving mothers less credibility. There is a study called the Ballast study that says that mothers in contested custody cases make deliberate false reports less than 2% of the time. And courts are disbelieving mothers, particularly when they're accused of parental alienation, 98% of the time. So you can do the math and figure out that mothers are always they're biased against mothers, particularly when they report abuse. And because of that, they're holding women to a higher level of proof, standard of proof. They're giving women less credibility, and they're blaming them for the actions of their abusers. And of course, they take a mother's emotion and frustration and anger in dealing with her abuser, all out of proportion to what it says about her parenting. So they're looking at basically her reaction, her normal reaction to the abuse, and calling her the actual perpetrator, which is part of DARPA. And I won't go into that, but that's deny. Abusers use that tactic. It's deny on the abuser, attack my victim, and then reverse victim and offender. So I will briefly say that in regards to shared parenting, I've been hearing from fathers' rights groups that Kentucky, which is the first state to implement the presumption of 50-50, they're having the statistic that, divorces are way down in Kentucky because we have 50-50. Well, yeah, because you're making it much harder for victims of abuse to leave their abuser. Why would we leave our abuser if we can't protect our children from that? Amen. At least if we stay, then we can be there to protect them. So my advice to those fathers' rights groups is to take a look at the homicide rates in Kentucky and DV homicide rates to see if they're going up, because I can guarantee that they are. They're going up in a lot of states because of these 50-50 presumptions. So I definitely wanted to point that out. The last thing I'm just going to talk about is that, as experts, we are really trying. I know there's a lot of talk about, courts educate. What do they need? Do they need education? Do we need to just, drop the whole system? And yes, all the above, right? We need to do anything that we can to educate, to change the system, to get this act passed, to scream it to the rooftops, because we're dealing with, and we often compare what's going on in family court with what happened with big tobacco back in the 1960s, when the Surgeon General's report came out and said, hey, tobacco links smoking and cancer. And with family court, the ACE research, we're linking adverse childhood experiences to diseases like cancer and heart disease. Because you know why? That stress and fear, if you think about it, you go to the doctor and you have a heart problem, they're going to say you need to reduce your stress. We're putting children through all of this stress, and it's causing them lifelong issues. The life expectancy of a child who's gone through this is 20 years less than a child that hasn't gone through the family court system and dealt with these adverse childhood experiences. So we really need to use our voices in every aspect of society, the medical profession, the legal profession, the education profession, media, all aspects of society need to come together, just like they did with cancer and smoking, to let everybody know this is a health risk, this is a problem, this is a major issue. And Barry and I, along with Dr. Motriski, and I have a book coming out later this year, where we're talking about all of this and all aspects of society and how we can all help to prevent domestic violence and child abuse, and particularly in child custody cases, because that's where the majority of these children are suffering and being murdered because they're being sent to live with their abusers. Thank you so much.
By the way, if anybody sees a black pocketbook with some sparkle, that's mine. I can't find it anywhere. Oh, thank you. Okay.
Not me, that was him back.
Thank you.
I might
Tell Kristen to come back. Okay. The next person on, the next expert on the list is Amber Brown, BSSWBT, medical social work and case management expert with training in civil and criminal procedures, appellate review, criminology, juvenile delinquency, Maryville University, St. Louis, Missouri, administrative law, Johns Hopkins Carey Business School, experience in human identification cases in the state of Missouri with Dr. Aaron Oji, and trained in bite mark identification by Dr. Richard Silvio, known for his work on the Ted Bundy case.
also a victim of the family court system, and then that was utilized against me to harm my profession in medical social work. So as you can see, I as well am fairly educated, and I went on to work for Novant Health Center in Wilmington, North Carolina. While I was there, I had started my work on the med-surg floor, so you get a various array of different types of cases. I worked in the adult ICU and pediatric ICU, and before I was transferred over to the pediatric ICU, I was told I was taking a position of a medical social worker, and she had suffered abuse from the physicians while she was working over there. So I kind of talked to her a little bit about it. I was a little nervous to go over there. She told me that they used her to make CPS reports, and they felt that that was her only purpose. So working in case management, you're supposed to collaborate together. Social workers are very undervalued in the medical system. We are the ones, not all of us know a significant amount about law, but I would say if it is a real deal social worker, they're not going to purge in a report to violate someone's rights and take their child away. And me, I'm ethical. I know, the ethics that I stand behind. And I knew that whenever I wanted to work with these kids over in the pediatric ICU, they weren't going to be telling me to make false child protective service reports because, well, I went to Johns Hopkins and I know the law. So, what ended up happening was, while I was working, I started to notice that there were specific cases I would not be consulted on. So some of these cases, like whenever I went through and I read, the medical documentation, I was just like, why am I not being consulted on this? And I would go down and I would find out that it was a white child, the family was wealthy, and then sometimes they were related to the physicians or nurses, or there was some type of relation in that area. It's kind of I would say a smaller area where everybody kind of knows everybody, and the kids would have some type of relation to the people, and those were children who were on life support for neglect. And so I would consult myself on those cases, and I would go in and I made the reports that needed to be made on those people because they endangered the welfare of a child, and that was. So then there were times where I would notice that if a family was like lower income or it was an African American family, they would be particularly harmful to them. And in one situation, I went and I spoke with the mother. It was an African American mother and African American father, and they had a brand new baby. The baby was a couple weeks old, and the baby had a condition. I went and I looked at my own research. The baby had a condition called biliary stenosis, I think. And that condition is something where I think it starts to show maybe like 10 to 12 days after the baby's born. The baby was only 2 weeks old. So I called over to the pediatrician. I ensured that the mother was, taking the baby to the doctor. She was doing everything she was supposed to be doing, and she did. She did everything she was supposed to be doing. The parents were under a lot of stress. They got into an argument in the room, and a nurse accused the father of punching the mother. I went in and I talked to the mom, and I even talked to the grandpa. He was on the cell phone. They were great people. The grandpa was there caring for her other 2 children. She had everything aligned that she needed to be doing. She wanted business. She was doing everything she needed to be doing as a mom. And she told me that he did not punch me. We got into an argument. He did not punch me. We were yelling at each other. Well, anytime they're yelling, I do have to make a report on something like that because you're not supposed to be having altercations around your kids. And I did make that report. But then what happened, maybe, I think the day after that, the child abuse pediatrician came in and she read through my notes and she asked me why I didn't make a report on medical neglect. And I was like, why would I make a report on medical neglect? I had literally done everything to make sure that, this was a medical condition, it wasn't some type of neglect, and it was 100% a medical condition, and there was absolutely no neglect. The mom did everything she was supposed to be doing. they told me this and this physician, she never even did an assessment on this mother. She never went in, never talked to her. I talked to her, and she's telling me she's codependent. I was like, this lady is not codependent. She is not codependent at all, and I don't know how you can say that whenever you haven't spoke to her. So I stated to her, I said, have you testified in front of the court? And she goes, yeah, I've been in there 1,000 times. I said, well, do you know what perjury is? So my time did not last very long there. But you know what? I will take a firing over somebody losing their child. Okay? So, amen. Because I had to do that. I know what happens to those kids, and when I know that children are put in homes with criminals who make them pee in pools of pudding and eat it for food, I'm not sending kids there. So
Damn straight.
Yeah,
That's right.
And that is a true case. That case is actually on YouTube. So if Congress wants to view it, they can view that. There's also additional cases on YouTube where there are parents who utilize children for food stamp money, and they will lock the refrigerator, and you will have this overweight foster parent who is eating all of the food, and you'll have starving children. So that really doesn't make sense to me. But so I made sure I just evaluated every single person that I ever worked with, and that's what I do now. I do it in my own time. If there is a parent who they have had a child taken because of false medical abuse and neglect, an allegation, I evaluate the case, and I just was able to reunify my 5th child this past week. She came through actually with Francesca. Francesca told me to work with her, and I got there was a commissioner involved, and the baby is going to be reunified, and they were not going to reunify the baby. They were going to adopt the baby out, and that brings me to my last point on this. With genetic, a lot of issues come with some of these reports. In the pediatric ICU, you get a lot of failure to thrive babies. And those babies require a lot of testing before you can accuse someone of not feeding their child. They don't do that. They will put the families in a room, they will give them a bottle, and they will start watching them to see if they're feeding the baby. But then sometimes if nurses are very nasty, which they can be, they will make false statements stating that the mom is not feeding the baby, and that all gets documented, and that becomes a part of a legal record. So, and then that hurts them for the rest of their life. But I have seen that myself. And so, whenever you have a kid who has a genetic disease, I'm going to talk about Golgi mitochondrial disease. I have Golgi, and my children have Golgi, and I was falsely accused of Munchausen by proxy. So, with Golgi babies, it's about, I think, 84% of those children have difficulty feeding, and 87% of them have liver involvement, 84% have seizures, 84% have neuropathy. They have varying issues that go on, and you're lucky if you get a diagnosis very early on. It took us about 4 years to get a diagnosis for my son. But this is kind of where the issue comes in, is that these providers don't put in referrals to genetic physicians, and a child abuse pediatrician is not an appropriate person if they do not have training in genetics to be giving advice on metabolic disorders or anything, even in relation to what our physician here has talked about. You have to have a specialized education in these things to be really sure that what you're doing is right. But they require multiple specialists, and the parents don't get the justice that they deserve. It's just an automatic immediate referral to Child Protective Services. These kids are some of the most complex kids who they need to be having urgent care, not delayed care. And the foster care system, Child Protective Services, they are delaying medical care for these kids. And then the other thing that I've seen in the hospital setting is that if you were a parent or to bring your kid into the emergency room and you said, I'm going to go on a cruise, I need you to watch my medically complex kid, they're going to call Child Protective Services on you. I literally had foster parents bring their children into pediatric ICU, and they were leaving them there so they could go on cruises, and social services would back them up and support them, and it would create a problem for me in my work because my job was to get them out of the hospital, and I could not get them out of the hospital whenever social services was encouraging them to utilize the hospital as a hotel room. It is, and so with all that, whenever I made my own Child Protective Service report, because I'm a mandated reporter, that information usually gets sent to the hospital, but because I had my own CPS case, whenever I had to call Child Protective Services on my ex-husband, they were sending patient information to my home. So I had to tell my supervisor that this information was coming to me, and I didn't know why. They had a social worker go in and see that I had a case before, and they immediately started trying to terminate me from my position, and for that, and then also not making the false report. But they had probably a page of 12 different allegations against me, and that's kind of where that ended. But overall, I think that is all I really have to say, and I appreciate everybody for coming here, and I hope that we can really make some change in all the different areas where we have some very significant problems. I hope Congress takes this serious, and I hope you support the Family Justice and Accountability Act.
Okay, this particular lady that I'm about to announce, don't get jealous, okay guys? I just have to say a few things first. This is a very seasoned woman that has passed how many bills? 3 bills. And one of them, she was like, literally she wore a cape, and she went in, she flew, she didn't even walk. And she did it in 24 hours. So I have the most amazing panel here. This is Kathleen Arthur. Kathleen Arthur, Title IV Reform. Kathleen Arthur is a 1982, even though she's only 21, University of Portland graduate. She is an award-winning national child advocate, a dedicated advocate whose work has transformed child welfare and public health policy on a national scale. In the 1990s, her pioneering research at Kaiser Sunnyside Hospital laid critical groundwork for national sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, prevention, shaping safer infant care practices. In 2016, Kathleen Arthur drove the passage of national Zika virus legislation by correcting data errors in Senator Patty Murray's office, reducing costs by 40%, and securing bipartisan support within 24 hours. That's freaking amazing. She also assisted Senator Wyden and Hatch in writing and passing the Family First Prevention Services Act, advancing family preservation and foster care. Recently appointed as President Trump's policy advisor on Title IV issues.
Trump 28!
We're such a wild city. Arthur now addresses the ghost children crisis for the foster care kids. Thousands of foster youth who vanished without being reported. So this is what I was talking about before, where they don't report. This is all children that we don't know about. By their social workers. How do you like that? Not looked for and often linked to Title IV misuse and the trafficking of foster children. Foster children are now the primary vector of child sex trafficking in America, through drafting the Accountability for Missing Foster Children Act. She urges Congress to enact urgent reforms to protect and find every foster child.
Thank you very much. I am just so thrilled to be here with everybody. I really am. There's advocates, there's parents, here's Francesca. We even have a monkey. So what I'm going to do...
Wait, there's a monkey here?
Yep.
A real monkey?
Wait, can I play with them? Where's the monkey?
Oh my god. I thought she was joking.
So that's now our official mascot.
He's in a backpack. It's our official mascot.
Can I do a podcast with him?
Now, when lightning and thunder collide, and you get a flippin' weapon from heaven, you use it. Now, Francesca and I have known each other for a long, long time. This is the second library conference that we did. That was 10 years ago. But we haven't actually ever worked together. But now that Francesca has this bill, she asked me to get ahead and join the team to try to help to get the bill passed. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to talk about my current research because God did throw down a weapon in the skies for us. Just 3 weeks ago, we found out about some government fraud that was going on. That is the biggest government fraud in the world that's ever been discovered. And so I'm going to go ahead and read you the email to Senator Grassley that I just wrote. And this week, I'm meeting in person with Senator Grassley, and then I'm meeting with Archibald. He's the guy who writes the laws. So this was an email that I sent him, and again, we had been working together for about 10 years. This is the title. Urgent oversight needed. State agencies' systematic failure to report missing foster children, enabling massive Title 4E fraud and fueling this child sex trafficking supply chain. There's supply and there's demand. We have been really paying a lot of attention to the demand side, and some dead guy with a list. But where are these kids coming from? That should be our I now serve as a Title IV policy advisor at the executive level and urge the Senate Finance Committee to exercise immediate oversight on a crisis of unprecedented scale. The largest state bureaucratic financial fraud and unwitting supply network for sex trafficking of children in the United States.
Oh my God.
This catastrophe was exposed by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in an Inspector General report just came out. The report was titled, State Agencies Do Not Always Ensure That Missing Children from Foster Care Were Reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in accordance with federal requirements. Between 2018 and 20, state child welfare has documented approximately 74,000 episodes of children missing from foster care. Shockingly, they estimated that from 75,000, over 50,000 were never reported. Never reported. They were not reported as mandated by law. Now, this includes specifically 35,000 missing, vanished foster children who were never reported. Never. Some were gone for 2 years. And I'm going to focus on these 35,000 unreported vanishing children. It underscores a profound betrayal of Congress' intent and the committee's stewardship over the power of the purse. These children became ghost children in the system, invisible to law enforcement, child protective agencies, and federal oversight. No alerts were issued, no searches initiated, no services provided. Yet, Title 4E reimbursements continued unchecked, as the states failed to update their placement records. They fraudulently claimed the funds for minors no longer in care, some absent for up to 2 years. Under conservative estimates, this misappropriation totals hundreds of millions of dollars annually in improper Title IV payments. This is not a mere administrative oversight. It is unfortunately a direct conduit to child exploitation. We now know how they're getting the sex trafficked children. We know now where the supply is. By rendering foster children unreported and untraceable, the state practices have inadvertently become the primary supplier for sex trafficking children in the United States. This is a fact. This is from a government report. The very scourge that Congress has tried to get rid of. Unreported foster youth now dominate the sex trafficking networks. Their disappearances are exploited by predators while states profit from the federal dollars intended for their protection. The root cause is stark. Federal law mandates reporting, but imposes no consequences. No consequences for noncompliance. Out of those 35,000 children who were never reported missing over 2 years, there was not one state actor that was ever held either civilly, criminally, or bureaucratically responsible for failure to report, even when those children were found dead or being sex trafficked. No, nothing. No. So, despite repeated congressional inquiries, HHS has failed to deliver comprehensive, verifiable state-by-state data, relying instead on incomplete NCMEC figures, that's National Center for Missing Children, that capture literally only half of the children. An unreported Title V definition has not been reported to the National Center for Missing Children, right? So I actually working with Senator Ossoff, who has been very, very good with this issue, and I got a confirmation that every single member of Congress who's reported on sex trafficking of missing children do not have the correct numbers. They're all using only the Center for Missing Children numbers, which does not include the approximately 50+% more children out there who weren't reported. So every single congressman and senator has a wrong number for the sex trafficked children. This opacity has birthed a nation of ghost children, undermining outcomes, accountability, and $1 trillion in cumulative Title IV investments projected over the next decade. In other words, the fraud is costing us, the taxpayers, millions of dollars. The Finance Committee holds the authority and the moral imperative to seal this breach. Interlocutor real-time data collection is a linchpin. Payment to verified placement and mandatory reporting, ensuing that no funds flow for the absent, and if the child vanishes, we'll be able to trace them. And this is an ICD coding system that's already used by Medicare and Medicaid. We've never lost a Medicare or Medicaid patient because the money is tied to the treatment or procedure, which is tied to the child or the person. And so they can't get paid under the ICD system. And they can't lose people either, or they won't get paid. Right now, if they lose people, they get more money. So, we need to do some sort of, and also every single state in the union right now has different coding. They have different definitions for what a minor is. They have different definitions what abuse is. It's a researcher's nightmare. So anyway, I respectfully urge the committee to act decisively with the following measures. Directly government accountability to do an audit, outside audit. Compel HHS to issue state-by-state transparent report enumerating the underreported missing foster children episodes. Convene public hearings to deal with this, champion legislation to have a real-time ICD synchronization, and this is the important one, against amendment to the federal reporting laws imposing civil and criminal penalties to state officials who failed to report vanished foster children. And escalated if a child suffers death from trafficking. If they had actual reports, I mean, if they had actual consequences on not reporting, they would stop trafficking. So basically that was a letter that I sent to him, and so he did respond, and I'm going to be seeing him. Now on to this speech. This is real quick. For decades, we have believed that our foster children in Child Protective Services were the last line of defense for vulnerable children. That when a child was placed into state care, they would be protected, monitored, and cared for. But today, we must confront a tragic reality. Far too many children disappear from state custody unreported, unaccounted for, unprotected. This is an epidemic of unreported missing foster children. This is not an abstract policy problem. It's a national crisis of human rights. Children vanish while the system intended to safeguard them looks the other way. And also, no state actor has ever been punished for failure to report a missing child and getting the money. They are not punishing those people for fraud. That's why I'm here. We are here to introduce the Family Justice and Accountability Act of 2025. So here's the critical truth. State actors, social workers, agency supervisors, and even the foster parents are the linchpins in this broken system. When they fail to report a child, whether due to negligence, overwork, misplaced priorities, they unintentionally have become the #1 sex trafficker supplying in the world. Wow. This is HHS. And don't you love it when a person reports their own fraud? I mean, this nobody read this report. They did not look at it. They did not realize that there were 35,000 children out there who were missing, vulnerable foster children who were not reported. And it takes a village to not report a child. It takes the foster parent, the teacher, the state actor. It is not something slipped to the crack. It is a purposeful not reporting because of the way the Title 4E is distributed. Title 4E is given per child, per day, a daily amount. And the second that the social worker or the foster parent reports a child missing that very day, they're supposed to stop getting money. A lot of them just say, well, maybe she ran away, I'll just give it a day or two, and then a day or two comes, and then you're worried that they didn't report it a day or two, and it just goes like that. It's these little tiny episodes that keep happening that is now funneling sex trafficking in America. And we have got to close the gap. And so what I recommend to do is that we, #1, ask the Family Justice and Accountability Act. Failure to report these children within 24 hours. We have to ensure financial structures on the Title 4E prioritize child safety, not things like ASCA, which is a bonus payment for stealing and adopting out a child. Require ICD system type of data that all states have the same definition of child abuse and the same definition of everything. We don't know, we can't find the kids, we have no idea. Even the Senate, Congress, right now, for an absolute fact, has no idea how many foster children are missing. Because in the reports that they have, they're only looking at the children who've been reported to the National Center for Missing Children. That report doesn't include the children who are not reported, which is greater than 50% of the children who are reported. So we found the linchpin, we found where the sex trafficking is coming from, and we found out what's going on. and it is HHS state actors who are doing it. They're failing to report these children at least 50 and plus percentage of the time, and we have absolute evidence now from a Connecticut audit and the IG report that these children are being found sex trafficked and dead. The sex trafficked and dead children are the only ones that the U.S. government is going back for clawbacks, meaning they're going back to the state and realize that this child hasn't been in care for a few years, yet they're still paying them. All they do is take the money and they make the state pay it back. There's no arrest for fraud. There's no looking into where the child is. There's nothing. So there's at least 3 points when a child goes missing. It's when they first go missing with a state actor, and then it is also the period of time when they're gone and they're not reported. I mean, no one is looking for these kids. Of course they're, and also they can't get a job because they're runaways, right? So they're literally sex trafficking for survival at this point. So they're not even looking at that population right now, and this has just got to change, and this will do it. So I'm good.
No, I don't want to say that.
Can everybody pause the recording right now? I gotta tell you guys, it's only privileged information for us. Can everybody just pause anything that's being filmed right now? Just pause it. If you're cameras again. We only have an hour and a half left right now. I'm going to make sure that everybody gets a chance. I'm going to introduce the core team and all the team leads. I have 2 more experts, and then I have Chris Lyle, who's also doing both Jersey Coast Emergency News, as you guys met before, and he's going to speak because he's really standing for domestic violence victims, which is really amazing. So I've got, just want to make sure we're filming before I call the next expert up. Is everybody back on track? Sorry, I just had to tell you guys that because I want you to stay motivated and pumped. Let me know when I'm good to go, when you're all filming again. Chris, yours is on?
Yes, she's going to change the battery out, she said, but we're good right now.
But it was paused during that when I did it.
Hey, we're not live, so I'm just going to go back in and edit things out.
Okay.
You're good.
Let me know what everyone's saying.
I want to make everybody's face look nice. We're good.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Angle it down.
Our whole production.
Oh gosh. The mic good.
Hello, hello, hello.
What those on?
And another thing, this room fits 200 people, okay? And we fill the room, so thank God for that. Okay, am I good to go? Can I start? I don't want to leave anything else. Everybody live streaming again? We good? Yes? Okay. My next expert, and I believe we've been doing this for 30 years? 36 years.
Something's wrong with your speaker.
Marilee McLean. She's an author and expert on domestic violence, a national and international speaker, advocate and expert witness on child abuse, child sex abuse, and courtroom reform. Did you want to come up to the beginning?
Hey, Fran, your speaker is all muffled right now. Speaker's muffled. We can't hear you from the speaker. It's all muffled. It's muffled.
I think your battery's getting low on that.